Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming here on such a remarkably beautiful day. I was told, though, that our people who come to these things don't care about the weather that much and rather be inside for the talk. So this is wonderful. Thank you. Here I am representing the Nelson-Atkins Museum, and I'm delighted that so many of you have come to our museum today. And I encourage you, though we are free and open to the public, but if you wish to become members, we would be most pleased, and the cookies are at half price upstairs once you become a member. I think this is very, very good. But also, I'd like to encourage you to think about becoming a member of the American Research Center in Egypt. This is an extraordinary group of people who many years ago in the late 1940s banded together and decided to work directly with the local Egyptian communities to excavate, to conserve monuments, and also to educate. One of the extraordinary things about ARCE is that they have training schools for Egyptian conservators, training schools for Egyptian archaeologists, and of course training schools for our graduate students coming over and working in Egypt. This bond between Americans and Egyptians, regardless of all sorts of political things that go on, is something that lasts and lasts forever. I would encourage you, therefore, to go on their website and look up ARCE, A-R-C-E, fabulous things there, and encourage you to join this fabulous institution. And the institution has been good enough to bring over from Cairo, I guess about 48 hours ago, Professor Tallet, who traveled from his excavation to Cairo, and then to Frankfurt, and then to Chicago, and of course the delay in Chicago until you could come down into Kansas City. Professor Tallet's work is in all ways exceptional. He did study Greek and Latin, which for me is of course terribly important, and then went on to Egyptian. He became an authority on the Red Sea, on navigation in the Red Sea, and started looking for ports and port cities and came up with extraordinary discoveries. He's also an authority on Arsisostris III, so we're particularly glad to have him here for that. But I know that Julian, our director, would appreciate this very much. He is an authority on food in ancient Egypt. And actually, you can go online and find a recipe book authored by him and some colleagues on how to eat ancient Egyptian food well. When I first heard of Professor Tallet's extraordinary discovery, it was on the web, and I confess I thought, oh, this is alternate facts, I think Kellyanne Conway, and called up Rita Fried in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, said, is this really true? And simply extraordinary. So, Professor Tallet, welcome to the United States, and please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Jerry Scott for inviting me in behalf of the ARCE to give this lecture, and also Jane Smith, who helped me to get a visa because I had an ugly Sudanese stamp on my passport. So I was happy to be there all the same. And I would like also to thank Robert Cohen for welcoming me in this Nelson-Atkins Museum. I'm really moved to be there today because I have not been in the States since 28 years. At that time, in 1919 and 1991, I have been attending the courses of William Kelly Simpson in Egyptology in Yale University, and it was a great time. I was really privileged to have the right to attend those courses. And since I learned he passed away a few weeks ago, I would like to dedicate this lecture to his memory. And also, before proceeding to this lecture, I would like to apologize for my very poor English, and since it seems that it has not really improved since that remote time I was in the States about 30 years ago. So, I will present today this lecture about the last discoveries on the place of Wadi al-Jarf. The title is a little bit confusing. It's a kind of a fake title, but anyway. I will speak about this harbor of the time of Khufu, and we will be back to the pyramid at the end of my lecture. So the place of Wadi al-Jarf is on the Red Sea shore on the Suez Gulf, the western coast of the Suez Gulf. It is one of the 3 harbors of the pharaonic time that have been recently identified on the Red Sea coast. The first one is Ain Sourna. You have it here. We have been excavating it since 2001. And the other one, the third one, is in Mersagawasis. It's not on the map. It's much to the southern part of Egypt. As for Wadi al-Jarf here, we started the excavation there in 2011 with my colleague and friend Grégory Marouard from the Oriental Institute of Chicago. And we have done this year the 7th campaign of excavation on the place. This place of Wadi al-Jarf was used to go to Sinai on the pharaonic period, and most probably only during the very beginning of the 4th dynasty. It was used by Egyptian people to go by sea to Sinai to fetch copper and turquoise in the huge mining district that you have in this area of Sinai. They were probably getting through the Wadi Araba here to get to the coast, and this place has been used during the very beginning of the 4th dynasty. This is kind of a very special feature for an harbor because, in fact, it is not an harbor that was occupied all the time. In fact, it is kind of an intermittent harbor. The Egyptian people brought their boats through the Wadi Araba here, dismantled boats. They built a boat again to have their expedition going to Sinai. And when the expedition was over, they just managed to store the boats on the place in caves that were cut in the mountain. And those cave system, I will speak about it in a few minutes, is one of the most original feature of all those harbors that we have now for the pharaonic period that we have on the Red Sea shore. This place of Wadi al-Jarf has been found before several times. The first guy that spoke about it was the British explorer John Gardner Wilkinson. He discovered the place at the beginning of the 19th century and wrote a report in the Journal of the Royal Geographical Society in England in 1832. He had identified the caves, but he was wondering why there were caves in this area of Egypt. He saw that there were burnt wood and pottery inside the galleries, and he jumped to the conclusion that it was catacombs that were probably from the Greco-Roman period. The place has been found a second time, probably following the indication of John Gardner Wilkinson and Burton, that were also in the place a few years later. Those two French guys, François Bisset and René Chabot-Morisseau, discovered the place a second time in the 1950s. And they identified in the caves that I will show you in a few minutes, they identified pottery from the Old Kingdom. So they were close to the good period for the use of this harbor. And there were archaeologists amateur, and they wanted to start excavation on the place. But unfortunately for them, they were doing their job around 1952, 1956, and they finally asked for an authorization to the Egyptian government for the excavation, but it was obviously not the right time for French people to ask for an authorization to excavate in Egypt in 1956. So the place has been completely forgotten a second time until we find it back in 2008 and started the excavation on it on 2011. So this place is spread on a very large area, and it's one of the problem that so this site presents. You can see that we have here several components of the place, several settlements that can be found on this map. In fact, probably one of the major reasons why the Egyptians done this harbor in this place is the presence of the spring that you have here on the mountain. It's today inside the monastery of St. Paul, this monastery with the luxuriant vegetation that you can see here. And here you have a spring which is able to produce about 4 cubic meter of water every day. So if you want to host a huge team for a long time, this spring is a chance, and it's probably in connection with the spring that the whole system has been done in Wadi al-Jarf. And you have also, for the archaeological field itself, at least 4 different settlements that we were able to record and draw. First of all, you have on the rear part of the system, on the mountain, you have a system of caves that are cut in the limestone. Those caves, we know that there are at least 31 of them in this area. Most of them are grouped inside this small limestone hill that you can see here, and you have other ones on the side of this small wadi, which is going from the north to the south. This is a view, a kite view of the limestone hill where you can see the entrance of most of those galleries here. Most of them have been excavated now. And we have also other settlements from the mountain to the sea. About 500 meters from the place where lies the caves, you have camps from the Old Kingdom with pottery from the 4th dynasty on the surface that were placed on the top of these small tables dominating the whole area. I think they were anxious of something at that time. And you can see that there is also another very strange settlement in between, exactly in between the sea and the mountain. You have this big building. We call him the intermediate building because we don't know what it is made for. When it has been found, it was completely buried with sand, as you can see on my kite view here. This is the way it looked at the time of the discovery when we first came during the year 2008, and we managed last year to clean up all the sand that's accumulated inside, and this is the way it looked like when we left the field a few days ago. So you can see this is really an impressive building of the Old Kingdom. It seems to be clearly dated back from the reign of Khufu, and it's probably in connection with huge troops of workers that were sent to the area. It has been placed at the heart of the system, but we don't know exactly the function of it so far. To finish with, we have also settlements in the nearby the sea. Also, we found a big jetty, a big L-shaped jetty. I show you this slide, and it is not a useful, it is not a very frequent view of it because in 7 years we were able only once to see this emerging from the water. But you can see the general shape of this jetty. It is L-shaped, and it has about 200 meters long from west to east and 200 meters long from north to south. It's really an impressive structure, and we have elements to date it back from the reign of Khufu also as the whole settlement of Wadi al-Jarf. So after this quick presentation of all the elements of the place, I will insist mainly on 2 areas that have been more carefully excavated those last years. The harbor area, which is probably the most original one, and the cave area, that's because we have cleaned about 20 of the galleries that are on the place, and it's on this place that we are finding the most impressive material. So, For the harbor, you can see that we have first this L-shaped jetty that you can see here on the map, but about 200 meters to the west, we have also camps from the Old Kingdom, rectangular camps that you can see here with the several cells. And when we excavated the place, here you have a kite view after the excavation of this, you can see that we have two buildings that are oriented from the north. The rear wall is to the north because you have a very strong wind blowing from the north, so you have to protect you from this very strong wind, and the entrance is all the time to the south part of those camps. In between those two camps, the southern one and the northern one, we have identified about 100 anchors from the time of the Old Kingdom. It was very surprising, but at the last time the people of the Egyptian period were there, they managed to kept all the anchors that were probably inside the harbor itself and to shelter them inside those buildings. You can see we have the very characteristical shape of those anchors, limestone anchors, and if you look carefully at them, you can still see the ropes they were tied with that is still visible on some of them. It's very well preserved. Other big surprise, most of those anchors were probably originally inscribed at the time they were stored inside the building. And for a sequence that we have here, it seems that we can read this formula like K-I Ejet, which means literally the one who exalts the white crown, which is a royal epitheton. It's possible that this name is the name of a boat that is wearing royal emblema, and so the people of this time would have written on the surface of the anchor the name of the boats they were belonging to. So we have good surprises because it was not very probable to have inscription with red ink preserved at about 200 meters from the seashore. This is a view of a map of the buildings after excavation. You can see the big deposit of anchor in between the two buildings. The northern one is probably for administrative purpose because we have found several ceilings in it. I will show it in a few minutes. Yeah, we have plenty of, we have found hundreds of pieces of clay ceilings, and most of them are wearing the name of Khufu, either the cartouche of Khufu, either the serrère of Khufu, with name of official that are sometimes linked to the projects of the building of the pyramid in Giza. And the other building to the south is probably for dwelling purpose. We have found ashes, pottery, domestic pottery inside. So a nice building that was interesting to find, to excavate. And from what we have found in it, it seems clear that it has been occupied during the reign of Khufu mainly. So it's exactly the same date that's the other component of the whole place. There is a slight reoccupation of the place, probably a little bit later on the history. You say that you have very small houses that are built on the surface of the erased previous big building. And we have found even a burial, but everything is probably also from the beginning of the Fourth Dynasty. Here you have a guy probably from the expedition that was just buried inside the building at the end of one of the expeditions. So we have also this big jetty. We managed to have as much documentation about it as we could. So we tried to do a map of it. We took kite view of it. You can see it from this the western part here to the eastern parts. It has been partially destroyed by the streams in some places, but it's still quite well preserved. You can see the big turn to the south. And when you look carefully through the water here, you can recognize at the bottom of the harbor here that there are several anchors that are still laying at the bottom of the harbor. You can see them with the hole at the top here, and we were also able to take some photographs of them underwater. Those anchors from the Old Kingdom are closely associated with big storage jars that are locally made and that we are finding everywhere on the place, and it provides a secure datation of this harbor from the reign of Khufu also. So we have also cleaned the landed parts of this jetty, which is really an impressive structure. You can see several views of it. It has been built by section with this kind of concave wall that is probably made to strengthen the resistance of this jetty from the north wind and the stream going from the north. And it has been very carefully compacted, dammed to be resistant to the water, and it's still very well preserved today, as you can see from the photograph that I show you in this moment. So we have here a massive construction from the time of Khufu, and we must say that it's most probably the most ancient artificial harbor in the sea that we know in the world today. And it predates most probably every other harbor, artificial harbor in the sea that we have in the rest of the world. So this is the final view of this harbor, which is really interesting because it's a very original feature of the place with the landed part of it, the drawing of the L-shaped jetty, and the area where we have found those pottery and anchors, giving a precise datation to the occupation of the place. And I will continue by presenting the other big area that we were excavating those last 7 years, the cave system that you have on the rear part this time in the mountain, in the limestone hill that you have on the other part of the place. Those caves are, I told you before, most probably the most important feature of those pharaonic harbors on the seashore, because Egyptian people brought their boats, dismantled boats on the area, but they didn't care to take back the boats to the Nile Valley. So they have to leave their boats waiting for the next expedition in caves that were cut in the mountain nearby the harbor. In this case, it's a little bit difficult to identify it at first glance because the caves themselves are about 7 kilometers from the seashore. But as we know 3 different harbors that have exactly the same features, at first we knew that, in fact, we had the cave system that is supposed to exist within an Egyptian harbor from the pharaonic period. So here you have this small limestone hill with all those entrance of caves. You can notice that all the caves were closed with big limestone blocks at the entrance, because in fact when the Egyptian people were leaving the place, they also managed to hide the place completely. Everything was buried with sand and mud, and nothing was visible in between 2 expeditions, and this closing system was meant to protect the deposits, very precious deposits that you had inside the caves themselves. You can see here the closing system that they managed to place in front of their caves. You can see that they have a kind of a corridor with those big limestone blocks here, and they pushed a kind of a portcullis in the entrance of the gallery itself to close it. It works quite well the first time, but as they were using the harbor several times, the problem for them was to extract the portcullis, to use a second time the cave, and this was, it seems, most difficult for them to extract the block and to do this closing system play a second time. So they had to compose. Sometimes they were obliged to break the roof of the galleries or to break part of the portcullis to enter and to do less elaborated wall to close it again after the first utilization. But on this closing system, it was also interesting to find that we had traces of the way they were pushing the blocks in the front of the entrance of the galleries. Here you have kind of a wooden railway that was used to push the block and to close the gallery. And we have found that most of the blocks, limestone blocks, were inscribed with control marks that are really like the control marks that we are finding also in the Giza area. It's exactly the same shape of drawing here. And those control marks are giving the name of teams that were in charge of closing the galleries and placing in front of the galleries this very impressive closing system. What is really interesting, I just show you that we had also in the filling up of those corridors some parts of boats that were still visible at the time of the excavation here. But what was really interesting is that for the inscription on this corridor, on these big limestone blocks, we have names of the teams of sailors that were involved in the management of the harbor at the time of Khufu. And it's pretty clear because the whole name of the team is constructed with the cartouche of the king Khufu, Renem Ruefui, which means may the god Khnum protect me, sorry. So we have here a full control mark, which reads exactly, the team named the followers of Khufu bring its two ladies. So it was quite puzzling as a name. At first, we didn't understand what it would mean, in fact. Just we noticed that the team that is written on this block is from the name of Khufu, so it provides a secure datation during the reign of Khufu. But we finally understood that the its that you have here, this is a pronoun s that you have here, is probably a reference to boats. So it is the name of a team of sailors, which is linked to a boat, and the boat has two snakes of Khufu on its prow. And so the name of the team is from the name of the boat, and the name of the boat is from the royal emblema of Khufu. And you will see that most of the team of the name of teams that we have in Wadi al-Jarf are constructed with the same system. And you have another one here, another team. This time, this team is the team named the follower of Great is the Lion or Great is its Lion. We have two versions of the name, but it's probably the same. You can understand here that you have a team of sailors which is linked to a boat, and the boat has probably a lion on the prow. And so we have an indirect evidence, indirect idea of the boats that were put into use in this harbor of Khufu in Wadi al-Jarf. What are we finding inside the galleries? We have, in fact, two main cases. Some of the galleries were used to store mainly storage jars. Storage jars, it has been taken during the excavation campaign that's just finished today. This is a new gallery that was excavated this year, and you can see that's on the ground. You can see big storage jars that were kept inside this gallery, and almost all the jars that you have here are inscribed with also a name, which is the name of a team that were involved in the work in the harbor of Khufu at the time it was working. So we have control marks giving names of teams, but we have also big storage jars that are locally made. We have found also the furnace that were used to cook these big storage jars, and they were inscribed before firing to the name of the teams they were belonging to. So we have many information, in fact, about the kind of teams of workers, of sailors that were in the harbor of Khufu at the time it was used. On the jars, we find, for example, a second time the same name of team. Great is the lion, or great is its lion. You have the full spelling, for example, in this inscription or in this inscription, and you have a connection in between the control marks that we found in front of the galleries and the pottery marks that we can find in those big storage jars. Those big storage jars were probably used to equip the boats and to store different kind of commodity, water, but maybe also bread and grain that were placed in the boats during the expeditions. Another mark that we found on the pottery is also very instructive, because we can see that it is a team whose name is the ones who are known of the 2 falcons of gold. And 2 falcons of gold that you have here is one of the 5 names of King Khufu. So every evidence that we have are linking very strongly the place of Wadi al-Jarf with the only reign of King Khufu. And on the other part of the galleries, on other galleries, we have also probably boats that were stored inside the gallery, dismantled. But unfortunately, at the time the Egyptians realized that they will not be back to the place, they managed to crush all the doors of the galleries and to pick up everything was still valuable inside. So what we have from boats is what is not usable, basically. So we have small piece of wood, we have tenons, we have ropes in great quantity, but we have not very significant pieces of wood so far that's belonged once to boats. And we have found plenty of material inside, copper tools, ceilings, every time with the name of Khufu also. We have stone tools. We have even inscriptions inside some of the galleries. For example, this small drawing of a standing man whose name is Idu. It is a scribe of the Fayum. The Fayum is at the beginning of the track going to the area of Wadi al-Jarf. So we have plenty of written material that is coming up from the excavation here. And you can see the view of those galleries after excavations. They are very long. Most of them are around 17 meters, but the bigger ones are more than 32 meters long. They are more than 2 meters, 2 meters and a half high, and about 3 meters large. So it's really impressive galleries that were cut in the limestone. And you can also notice that inside some of the gallery, you have small walls of stones here. They were probably meant to place the beams of the boats on this kind of support to avoid the water, if by chance the water was entering the gallery, to spoil the wood of the boats. So this is probably an element to the storing of the boats that you have inside those galleries, most of the galleries that you are excavating. And from the inner part, it's possible also to see the closing system of the galleries with they are first narrowing the entrance with 1 block, and here you have the portcullis that was placed in the entrance to securely close the gallery when the Egyptian teams were out of the harbor. But the most impressive find was the one of plenty of fragments of papyri that you have found in this area, cave number 1 and 2 of the place. We begin to have small pieces of papyri in the whole area here, but at the end we realized that we were in front of a big archive deposit. In fact, we excavated all this area. We have found those places are places where papyri have been found, but in fact most of them were in the closing system itself of the gallery, in between the 2 portcullis that you have at the entrance of this gallery number 1. And so about 90% of the papyri that we have found are coming up from this pit when everything was placed or discarded at the time of the last leaving of the Egyptian from the harbor of Wadi al-Jarf. You have some view of the papyri when they were excavating in this pit, and I even have, it doesn't work, but I thought, there was a small find, but it seems not to work. That should have shown you the real size of them, but you have have accounting documents, and you have also fragments of diary that are coming up from this pit in between two blocks at the entrance of cave number 1 of the place. And so you have very big sheets of papyrus sometimes, but other pieces are really modest, of about only a few centimeters. And we could reconstruct big segment of papyri from the different fragments that we got at once. At the end of the campaign in 2013, we have made about 70 frames of glass with pieces of papyri on the place that we gave to the Ministry of Antiquity to be stored in the magazine of the Museum of Suez. But it was not finished because, in fact, every year, except this year, we are finding pieces of papyri that are improving the collection of documents that we have from Wadi al-Jarf. For example, in year 2015, in this area, where you have several caves here, we found this, you can see here the closing system, which is impressive in this area of the place. They first placed the big limestone block at the entrance of the galleries, and then fill up the gaps with smaller blocks of limestones, and everything at the last was buried with sand and mud to hide everything on this place. But by excavating this place, we have found this impressive document. It's a small document that you can see here. It is complete papyri, and I would suspect that it is the first ID card that we know in the world, in fact, because you have just the title of an official. The official has the name of the great of the palanquin, it is here, and he is also the director of the dwarves of the linen clothes and the director of the necklaces stringers, the royal administrator Neferirou. This is probably a kind of ID card that was carried by the official to prove his identity, and it was folded and probably tied with a rope to the neck of the holder of the document here. And what is really interesting is that you have here an official which is probably maybe the immediate predecessor of the famous dwarf Seneb, which is known from the Cairo Museum with a very well-known statue, because he has exactly the same kind of titles, and his presence in the Wadi al-Jarf is pretty logical because, in fact, he is also director of the necklaces stringer, so he has something to do with jewelry. And of course, in Wadi al-Jarf, we are on the route to Sinai to fetch turquoise and copper. So I think this guy is pretty well at his role in Wadi al-Jarf. And so we have interesting documents that are still coming up year after year during the excavation of the place. So I will finish with more detailed presentation of the main papyrus deposit that we found in 2013. Part of it is now published. We have published very recently, it appears in fact last week, the first papyri Jarf A and B. And I would like to give you a general idea of the kind of information that we can extract from those papyri. That are also the oldest papyri ever found in the world, at least the oldest papyri wearing inscription, because we had papyri from the first dynasty in Egypt, but those are probably the most ancient papyri giving written information and giving an inside view of the administration at the time of the very beginning of the fourth dynasty. So what we have, in fact, is probably a very coherent archive that is linked to a team of sailors that we know from the place. We have two categories of documents. The first one are accounting documents, registering food and goods that are delivered to the workers. And we have also diaries, logbooks that are probably more original, that are giving account of the activity of the same team of workers. So this is one of the most important documents that we have found here, because you have here a very precise datation here. The papyrus is dated back to the year after the 13th census of the cattle. This is probably the year 26 or 27 of King Rufu, which is today the last year known of this king. So we have a precise datation of probably the whole archive that appear on this papyri, and we have fragments of the same datation that appear on several pieces, small pieces of papyri that were gathered, that are found in the same area. But what you have here is probably more interesting for us, because here you have the full name of one of the team that were employed inside this arbor of Khufu, and the team is also named from the name of the king. You have the cartouche here, and the name is literally the follower of Rufus Ureus is its prow. And this last name is giving, in fact, a definitive proof of what I was saying a few minutes ago. That's all the teams that we have here are teams of sailors. They are getting their name from the boats they are linked to, and the boat itself has a distinctive feature recalling the mightiness of the king. And in this case, you can imagine that you have a boat that has a snake at its prow and is probably representing the mightiness of King Khufu. And what is also very interesting for us is that, in fact, this team is known from hundreds of inscriptions on storage jar that we have found everywhere on the different location of the place, on different components of the place. We have the name of this team on the seaside, we have the name of this team on the intermediate building, and we have, of course, the name of this team several dozen of times in the cave area. It is very... This is a very concise rating of the name of the same team here. Basically, they write only Pro and Ureus, but in fact, the papyri is giving a definitive indication to read the full name of the team, and it is the team of the people that are associated of a boat whose name is the snake of Khufu. Rufus Ureus is its pro, its meaning the boat, of course. So we have in this documentation several accounting documents. This one is nice because it's in hieroglyph. You can see that everything is coming from the Père Shena, the granary of the king, and you have different kinds of commodities that are provided to these workers. They were not so poor, in fact. You can see pieces of butchery, like jeru, that's ribs that are delivered to them. You have here different kinds of bread, like the bread shaout that you have here. Fresh figs, dabu, are also appearing here. You have also kinds of beer that are as beer serepet here. So you have a different variety of food that is given to the workers that are working in the arbor of Khufu. And here you have an account of bread here. In fact, you have the title of the document. When it was rolled, it was possible to read this small indication and to identify immediately the piece of administration that you had. And on the other side, you have just a very nice accounting document for bread, for barley, for dates also. And every time you have the date of the document, the month where the food is delivered to the workers. You have here the place from where the food is coming. Here it is Arpunum. It is a place on the western delta. And on the lower part here, you have the registration of what is supposed to be given to the workers. In fact, in 3 columns, in kind of a table, you can see that we have in red what the administration is supposed to give to the workers. In the middle column, in black, you have what has really been given to the workers. And on the last column, you have what is still waited by the workers. And I think administration has not changed to the present time, but they are all the time cutting the wages. About one third of the wages is not delivered to them anyway. So what is also interesting is that on the other part of the same document, you can see that this time it's not the same gnome that is providing the food. Here you have the Delphine gnome, which is on the eastern part of the delta. So there is kind of calculation of the administration. It's not the same area that is providing the food for the workers. There's a really logistic mind of the administration to avoid one single place to be spoiled by those delivery of food. So it varies in the time, and you have here probably one of the way, an indication of the way the administration is going on at the time of Khufu. So other accounting document, this one has been completely reconstructed from several pieces, and I still have to work a long time to complete this kind of document. Here you have the different components of one team. Each team is divided in 4 sections. The great one, the one of the port, the prosper one, and the little one. So you have 4 divisions of the team that appear on the documents, and probably here names of people that are benefiting from the delivery of bread that is mint on this document. And here, another accounting document, really interesting, because here you have probably the name of a camp. It is a place where you sleep, that is named here. So maybe it's linked with a place we are excavating in the Wadi al-Jarf. And they are delivering, first of all, food, grain, barley, and dates. But you also can recognize here, for example, mineb and anet. There are 2 copper tools that are used in the building of ships. And they appear in representation scenes that are showing the building of ships. So there is a close connection in between those documents and what we are experiencing in the Wadi al-Jarf. So the second category of the document are diaries and logs book, and it's probably the most original part of what we have found. In the big cachette that we excavated in 2013, we have about half of the documents that are accounting documents, and the other half is diaries that are giving account of the work of the same team of sailors for a period that is probably around 1 full year. And what you have here is that, in fact, it's organized like a table, exactly the same way of the accounting document are organized. You have on the top of the document the precise datation, the months of the diary here. You have on the second line each day of the month, which is detailed, and you have on the lower part for each day 2 columns of hierarchic script that allow the one who is keeping the log to say what he has done this very day. So it's a very precise documentation. It is also you will see, very repetitive, but it provides valuable information about the life of those team of sailors during a full year. They were employed by the royal administration. And it is a point where we are at least coming back to the Pyramid of Giza, because, in fact, those sailors were employed all the year long by the royal administration, so they had, during the same year, several missions to do for the king. And we have very different things all the year long. The 2 first documents, Papyri A and B, are clearly linked to the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza, of Khufu in Giza. And those sailors are in charge of providing the limestone blocks for the carrier of Tura and bringing them by boat to the area of the Great Pyramid. And we have so the first inside view of the building of this big pyramid. Of course, they are not telling us all what we would like to learn about the pyramid. We have nothing about the way the pyramid was built, in fact. They are concentrating on their own work. But at least it's the first time that we can see that we have in front of us somebody who has seen the job, who has seen the building of the pyramid at the time it was built. So I tried to have an idea of the time of the different papyri that we have here. I'm sorry, it's in French, but I had not the courage to translate everything in English. But what I would like to show you is that, in fact, we have a single date. The month of Aret, the first month of Aret, appears on Papyrus A, and from calculation from the Eliac rising of Sotis, which is not perfect, but anyway, we can determine that most probably this first papyri is dated back from probably the month of July of the last known year of the king Khufu. And so we have in fact, different diaries. The two of, I will present in detail two of them here, Papyrus A and B, but we have also fragments of Papyrus C, D, and A, and those papyri are giving account of the work of the same team of sailors for a full year, most probably. Each log was for 2 months, and so we have probably about 10 months of activity that are registered from those logs. The first papyri is probably a kind of preparation of the work in between Tura and Giza. The second one, Papyrus B, is is giving information about bringing the block of limestone from Tura to Giza. And we have also, in the rest of the documentation, other very interesting things. For example, probably the building of an harbor on the Mediterranean Sea, on Papyrus C. And also Papyrus D and E, we have works, but it's very fragmentary works that involve the team of sailors that they are bringing food and the material to the royal palace. And the royal palace is probably in the area of Heliopolis. So, but I will not have the time to develop on this small fragment. And I just want to concentrate on the two bigger documents that we have here. They are organized by decades. The time for the work is 10 days, and every 10 days, the mission of the team is changing. So here you have first, on this first document, which is dated back for the first month of ARCE, you have 10 days when the Inspector Merer, most probably, but he's not yet named on the document. You have the registration of several two-way trips in between Tura and Giza. We don't know exactly what happens, but they are able to do the round trip in 1 day and a half, something like that. So they are proceeding very quickly in between Giza and Tura. We don't know why at first. And on the other part of the document, we have probably, here you can see the names of the Tura carrier, Ro-Aou, that's are named clearly on the document several times. And of course, you have also the pretty clear name of the pyramid of Khufu at Giza. Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, is named several times in this part also of the document. But what is really interesting is that's what happens in the second part of this Papyrus A, because we have new toponyms that are appearing and new information. In fact, if you are reading this, you have the hero of the day, the Inspector Merer. In fact, it is probably the official which is keeping the record and is writing himself the diaries. And he is giving a precise account of what he has done. And you can see that's here. He spends the day, I'm sorry, I tried to, I jumped too quickly to the rest, And the day 11 here, Inspector Merer spends the day with his file. That's been a small section of a team, probably 40 men. I will speak about that in a few minutes. Carrying out works related to the dike of Rocher Khufu. Day 12. Inspector Merer spends the day with his file, carrying out works related to the dike of Rocher Khufu. They are speaking of a kind of a barrage, a dam, a jetty, somewhere nearby the area of the pyramid. Day 13, Inspector Merer spends the day with his file. The dike which is in Rocher Khufu. Rocher Khufu is the name of the entrance to a lake of Khufu. And so we have a very, very specific toponym that appear here on the documentation for the first time. And if we jump at the end of this part of the document, we can see that after having gathered probably a huge workforce of about 600 men, the Inspector Merer is lifting the piles of the dike. And so there is something that seems to show that they are destroying a dam in a place which is at the entrance of a lake nearby the pyramid of Khufu. This is in connection with the work that Mark Lehner has done those last years, a very, very precise work he has done by studying the neighborhood of the pyramid and showing that, in fact, at the time of the building of the pyramids, there was a big artificial lake that was cut in front of the plateau where the pyramid stands. And this artificial lake is probably meant to allow the raw material entering in the construction of the pyramid to get to the plateau of Giza. So I'm just showing you old photograph of the pyramid that show that during the floods, the water can go very close to the pyramids themselves. Here you can see that it's not so far away. Even in modern times, you can still see that the area can be flowed relatively close to the Giza plateau. And so I will borrow a few slides to Marc Lehner from one of his articles to show you, in fact, the reconstruction of this artificial basin, artificial pools that you had probably at the foot of the pyramid. He was able to determine the shape of those pools by studying the cores of sewer company that was working in Giza in the, I think it was the late 80s, something like that. But from those information, he was able to determine that, in fact, you have probably at the foot of the pyramid this system of big basin, big pools with water that are allowing boats to go very close to the pyramid to discharge some material like limestone blocks for Tura, for example. So it's just need to be precise. What are exactly the things that are doing Inspector Merer at the time he wrote this small part of his diary? I'm sorry, it's completely gone. I don't know why, but in fact, I was just giving you here the account of the way in modern Egypt, in pre-modern Egypt, you had the use of seasonal canal. In fact, they were using canals to sail on the Nile, and those canals were just flowed when the inundation of the Nile was coming. And what we know from the traditional sail on the Nile is that when the river was getting lower, they were just closing those seasonal canals to allow the water to remain inside the canal. So what we have basically probably in those in the first papyri, the first papyrus A, is that they are opening the seasonal canal to let the water enter at the time of the inundation, and from this point they are able to bring the limestone block from Tura to the building of the pyramid of Khufu in Giza. So we have probably here a most important information because it's a starting point of the full campaign of providing limestone block from Tura to the pyramid, and they could not do that all the time of the year. It was only possible when it was the high Nile, the flood of the Nile, that is between July and November on the best option. So we have probably here something whose name is Rocher Khufu. It's probably the entrance to the lake here. And we can infer also that's probably the administration of the building of the pyramid was standing somewhere in this area. And so this papyrus is probably giving an idea of the beginning of the work for bringing limestone blocks to the pyramid. In Papyrus B, we were able to reconstruct a great deal of this document that you can see here. And we have, this time, regular transportation of block from Tura to Giza. In fact, we have two different locations from those blocks. We have Tura North and Tura South. Tura South is used for 10 days, and after 10 days, they are changing location, and they are extracting the block from Tura North. So they are changing regularly of place to extract the blocks from the carrier Tura, and they are bringing them to the pyramid of Giza. Of course, the alternance between Tura South and Tura North was a clue to reconstruct the papyri the way I have done to reconstruct about 40 days of activity of the team in the Papyrus B that you have here. So what you have here is clearly the two-way trips of Merer from Giza to Tura. And for example, at the beginning of the preserved part of the papyrus here, you can read, day 25, Inspector Merer spends the day with his file, hauling stone in Toura South, spends the night at Toura South. So he is just tracting the blocks to place them inside the boat. Day 26, Inspector Merer casts off with his file from Toura South, loaded with stone for Arret-Roufou, spends the night at Cheroufou. So one day is not enough to go to the pyramid from the place of the area of the carrier of Toura. Day 27, set sail from Cheroufou, sail toward Arret-Roufou, loaded with stone, spend the night at Arret-Roufou. Day 28, cast off from Arret-Roufou in the morning, sails a priver towards Toura South. Day 29, Inspector Merer spends the day with his file, hauling stones in Toura South. So you have a full cycle of the work of this official. He is loading his boat in Toura. After that, he is departing for Giza. It takes about 2 days to reach the pyramid and to discharge the block, and it takes only 1 day to go back with an empty boat to the carrier of Toura. But in 3 days, he has done a full cycle of his work here. And what is interesting is that we can infer that they were able to sail with normal boats about 20 kilometers a day. And you will see that it seems to be coherent with the other information that we can get from the papyri. This is the area of Toura, and I suspect that we have a lecture this morning about Toura, but you have all this area between Toura and Massara, and probably you have 2 different spots where the Inspector Merer is working with his team, Toura North and Toura South. That's there's about 7 kilometers in between the 2 points, and that's could explain that we have all the time the 2 different toponyms, Toura North and Toura South, on the documents. And you can here have an idea of the galleries from where the blocks were probably extracted at the time of the pyramid. Here you have another part of the same diary. Here it is probably one of the most important moment of the life of the team, because here you have not Inspector Merer, which is one who is writing the records, but you have here a most important guy whose name is the director of the 6, Ijeru. And this guy, Ijeru, is probably a small boatman with this guy, is sent to fetch the food for the worker to Heliopolis. And it takes effectively about 4 days to do the round trip for Heliopolis. It's about 40 kilometers. We have seen that you can travel about 20 kilometers a day. So this guy is leaving on the first day of the month to fetch the salaries, the wages for the workers, and is coming back the 4th day, so it corresponds to the information that we have. And it is really important for them because the arrival of the food is written in red in the papyri. It's the only place where we have red ink. Very important. He fetched the food for the workers, and from the quantity of food that we have here, it is a huge quantity, 40 harsak and the large measure ekat of Besset bread. That would be about 2,000 liters, but it corresponds to more or less to 1 ton of bread. And I try to calculate from the daily bread that we have from other sources in Egypt, but it would correspond to the daily ration for a team of about 40 workers for 1 full month. And this bread, of course, was supposed to be preserved for 1 full month, and is probably the base of the fooding for those workers. And it is also corresponding very well with the researches of Marc Lehner, because he has studied these big buildings that are nearby the pyramids, and he thinks that there are a place to sleep for the workers that were involved in the building of the pyramids, for example. And he jumped to the conclusion that each of those big rooms is able to shelter about 40 men. So there is a close connection in between the information that we can get from the papyri and the information that we can get for the general analysis of the data from the fourth dynasty. And here, this is the last part of the Papyrus B that we have here. It's very interesting because this guy, Merer, is all the time doing the same thing, gets it casting off from Toura, going to Aret-Roufou with blocks and so on. But one time, it happens something. He's probably required to do something else by a very important official. Here we have the mention of the Iripat Enra-F, which is also said to be the director of Rocher-Roufou. This is the entrance position to the lake of Roufou, which is at the foot of the pyramid, and this guy is very well known. He was, at the time of the end of the reign of Roufou, probably the main administrator to control the building of the pyramid. He was the half-brother of the king, and he was in charge of all the works of the king. So he is, in fact, the big boss. And so this poor Merer has to do something like a corvée, most probably, for this huge official on the way back to Toura, where he was supposed to continue to load the block on the boats and go back to Giza. And we can sometimes have some interesting information also, visual information. This one is really important to my mind, because here you have those three hieroglyphic signs. That's probably the sign of the chapel here. And in one part of the document, it is said that Inspector Merer and his file are sleeping in nearby the chapels of Aret-Roufou. What are those kind of chapels? I would presume that it could be the lower temple of the complex of Giza, which is not known by the archaeology, but we could have here kind of a visual idea of the way it was built at the time of Roufou. Just example of what I could think is the Hepsed of Djoser in Saqqara, because you have the same kind of chapels, and so maybe you had this kind of construction, this kind of building in the area of the Pyramid of Giza, but unfortunately the archaeology is not able to confirm or infirm this for the moment. So I will conclude on this point, because you can see that from the papyri that we have found, the ID, the picture that we could get from the harbor of Roufou has changed dramatically. At first, we thought that it was just another harbor on the Red Sea shore. It was, of course, the most ancient of all. But at least at the end, we can imagine that the Wadi al-Jarf harbor is just part of a gigantic network that has been put into use by King Khufu to build his pyramid. And you can see that, in fact, the project of the king is needs raw material that is coming from the whole country, granite from Elephantina, pigments from the western desert, alabaster from Middle Egypt, basalt from the Fayoum area, limestone from Toura. Of course, we have seen it in the papyri because we have teams of sailors bringing it to the pyramid. Of course, also copper, because when you are building a big structure like the Pyramid of Giza, you dramatically need copper to cut the stones. And so they needed dramatically copper, and it's probably the reason why this place, Wadi al-Jarf, has been put into use. And we have also other information from the papyri. For example, we can see that the area of Egypt that are not able to deliver raw material, like the delta, they are giving food for the worker. They are contributing to the project of the king this way. And even some of the province that we have there are probably giving the workforce itself. For example, the team of Meher that we have on the papyri seems to come from the second nome of Lower Egypt, and it would have been the contribution of this part of Egypt to the gigantic project of King Khufu. So to finish with, just a word about my team, which is working with me on Wadi al-Jarf. And first of all, Grégory Marois, archaeologist from the Oriental Institute of Chicago, which is a senior archaeologist in this area. Damien Lenné, topographer of the Maison de l'Orient et de la Méditerranée. Séverin Marquis, archaeologist of the French CNRS. Emmanuel Larose, architect from the CNRS. Frank Burgos, stonecutter from the CNRS. You have plenty of different kind of profession in the French CNRS. For instance, we just want it to exist a little bit more. And we have also in the team Mohamed Abdelmegid, who is an archaeologist, a specialist from diving, and a team of divers is right now operating on the place of Wadi al-Jarf. To finish with, we have several PhD students involved in the project, and we have funds from the French Institute of Archaeology, from the French Foreign Office, for the French CNRS, and we have also got several dotation of foundings by private association, private society, like the ARCE Foundation, the Honor Force Foundation, and the French enterprise that are present in Egypt, like Vinci and Colasrail. Thank you for your attention.
I think that we have time for a few questions. If you could raise your hand high and ask them clearly, I would be in all ways much obliged. Did you see something out here? Do we have a question? We have laser lights. Yes, in the back.
You said that the canal system was seasonal and they would seal up the kind of the lake basin when the water was down. Why did they keep that lake basin operating when the seasonal canals weren't?
Why they were operating? I'm sorry because I didn't catch you.
Could you ask again a little bit louder? I'm sorry.
Is there a mic?
No, there's not.
You said that they had a seasonal canal system, and the canals, when the canal system was not in use, when the water was low, they would seal up the lake areas by the pyramid. Why did they keep those lake areas with water?
I think it's just a guess, in fact, because we have not so many information. What I said is from the observation of the pre-modern Nile by a very important book that appears a few years ago by John Cooper, whose name is Medieval Nile. And this way of closing the seasonal canal to retain the water inside is to provide the water to be able to sail on it the time the flood is very low. So it's probably something like that could happen in Giza. They were closing the canal to retain the water inside, and so even if it was not possible to do the same thing as during the flow, they were still able to sail with boats in front of the pyramid. This is probably something like that. But I unfortunately can't say much more about this because it's still a pure guess that this part of the papyrus is in connection with this kind of seasonal canal that are much more known from the medieval and pre-modern period. Yes?
I had a question about what do you think the reason is for having these logbooks concerning the transfer of blocks from to the plateau at Wadi al-Jarf? Is it because like the crew of Merer was working between Tura and Giza, and then they were transferred to Wadi al-Jarf and they took the documents there and then they remained there?
In fact, there are two questions. I think first of all, those papyri were kept every day. It is possible. I have not the time to enter in the details, but from the writing you can see that it has been filled very progressively, not in one time. And so they had to keep their records with them every day and to travel with them because they were filling up the blanks every day. And the main purpose of those logs, to my mind, is that it's possible to control the activity of the team. They are employed all the year long by the team so they can justify their wages by keeping their own record very precisely. So the reason why everything was thrown inside the pit in between the two blocks at the entrance of the cave number 1 of the cave system that we have is for us still a guess. Why didn't they took back the information to the capital, to the administrative area to be checked by the administration? That we don't know. Maybe if the rain has changed approximately at this time, that could be a clue, but we cannot be sure. But anyway, this is pretty logical that they are bringing with them their own records because they are filling them up every time. And so, yeah. the presence of the logs at one time in Wadi al-Jarf, it's to my advice, logical.
We have another question.
I would like to know, your camp, this evidently is a photo of your camp.
Yeah.
What is your work schedule and all the people that work with you? Are they there all the time or just a certain months of the year? How do you schedule a day?
As for the work, archaeological work, we are working about one month and a half. We have this camp stays on the place. We are very close to the cave system with this camp. It's about we just need about 3 minutes to get on the field work from this point. And when we leave the place, there is nothing left. We have just small bungalows that we are using as offices for to write and so on. That are staying on the place, but all the tents are removed and so on. So we have in the team about 60 Egyptian workers. That's our workforce. And we are operating in 2 different positions. So, for example, this last year we had a team working on the seashore and the other one working on the cave area.
So
I don't know if I've answered to your question after all.
So basically, just 60 people do this.
Yeah, we have 60 workers, and we are about 15 searchers from France, Belgium, Canada, America, and so on.
That's
We
amazing.
have time for another.
How did you know where to start the excavation in the first place?
Yeah, in fact, this place was known for a long time, and as I show you, in fact, the British explorer have seen the place in the 19th century, and the French pilots of the Suez Canal also in the late 1950s. So we had information about the place because they left a small scientific dossier to the French Institute of Archaeology. So we were searching for a long time this place in the beginning of the 2000s. I just learned today that Michael Jones was there about 10 years before us on the cave system. Too bad, Michael. But anyway, we were aware that it should have been an harbor on the Red Sea. As we were also already working on the Ain Souna area, we were aware that when you have caves not so far from the sea, you can expect to have an old harbor. And so even before having found back the place where lies the harbor itself, we were aware that cave system means harbor, and we would have had an harbor of the Old Kingdom in this place. And the caves were obvious, they were open and very visible.
Time for one last one.
Yeah, Mark.
Some of you are, oh yes.
Thank you. Very interesting. I was wondering about the trappings that you found inside the gallery system. For instance, from Mexico, we have a lot of wooden material,
Yeah.
ropes, those kinds of things. And I was wondering whether you see any evidence of these galleries, this system sort of continuing also into the 5th dynasty, or whether it completely stopped and the whole thing sort of.
Yeah, in fact, we have no evidence from the pottery that is out of the 4th dynasty. And when we are excavating, for example, the area nearby the sea, we found that probably they switched from the place of Wadi al-Jarf to the place of Ain Souna, because Wadi al-Jarf is nice because it's right in front of the mining zone. So at first glance, it seems to be a kind of an ideal position for an harbor to go to Sinai. But in fact, the position is not so good because, as you have seen, the whole settlement is spread on the very huge area. You have to walk about 7 kilometers from the caves to the Red Sea shore, and you are also pretty far from the administrative system, which is in the Memphis area. So they realized that the place was probably not the best, and they moved to Ain Souna, and we have a precise indication of the time that could have been done, because And in Ain-Sona, we have ceilings from different kings of the Old Kingdom. But the first one that we have is Kefren, Raafre is the first one. And when we are excavating the area nearby the sea, on the last level of occupation of the big intermediate building that we have found ceilings of Raafre also. So he's probably responsible for the transition in between the place of Wadi al-Jarf to the place of Ain-Sona. And Ain-Sona was probably the right position because it has been used for almost 1,000 of years. And we think that, in fact, Wadi al-Jarf was probably used maybe less than half a century.